Section 1 begins not with a moment of triumph, but with the kind of humble, almost fragile beginnings that remind us how every larger-than-life figure starts as just another face in the crowd. The early days of this artist's life are not often discussed in detail, yet they form the foundation for everything that followed. Born into circumstances that were far from glamorous, they weren't handed success on a silver platter. Instead, what they inherited was a sense of hunger, a restless energy that would later become their defining fuel. Even as a child, there were small sparks of individuality that made them stand out, little flashes of charisma or creativity that seemed too big for the environment they were raised in. Those who knew them in these formative years would later recall how it always seemed like they were destined for something unusual, as if the world around them couldn't quite contain their ambitions. Still, destiny doesn't guarantee success, and in those early years, there was no clear map pointing toward fame. There were struggles, financial hardships, family challenges, and the constant reminder that nothing would ever come easy. Yet, paradoxically, it was this very lack of comfort that instilled in them the resilience they would need to survive the chaos of a public career. Growing up, they turned to music not just as entertainment, but as escape and expression. It wasn't simply about following a trend. It was about finding a language that spoke when words alone weren't enough. Hours would be spent listening, mimicking, experimenting, absorbing sounds and styles until eventually a distinct voice began to emerge. Those who encountered them during this stage often noticed how intensely they committed themselves, even when resources were scarce. Makeshift studios, borrowed equipment, even just scribbling ideas in notebooks late at night. Every moment became a rehearsal for the life they were determined to carve out. While others might have been content with ordinary routines, this artist was already rehearsing for a stage they hadn't yet reached, imagining a crowd that didn't yet exist, and preparing for a spotlight that hadn't yet found them. Of course, the journey was not free from doubt. Friends, family, and peers sometimes wondered if this relentless obsession with art was practical. Dreams, after all, can feel fragile when stacked against the realities of bills, obligations, and expectations. At times, even the artists themselves questioned if the sacrifices were worth it. Late nights, missed opportunities for stability, and the constant fear of failure. Yet each time doubt crept in, something stronger would push back, an inner voice that refused to let go of the idea that they were meant for more. This wasn't simply ambition, it was survival. To abandon the dream would feel like suffocating, and so they pressed on, even when the odds seemed stacked against them. These early sacrifices often go unnoticed in the glittering narratives of fame, but they are crucial. Without those sleepless nights, without the countless hours of practice, and the willingness to endure ridicule or rejection, the later chapters of success would never have existed. What makes this stage of their life so powerful is that it humanizes them. Before the headlines, before the controversies, before the fans screamed their name, there was just a young person, struggling to make sense of the world, clinging to a dream that felt impossible. And in that struggle, they built the very resilience that would carry them through the storms of later years. But the most fascinating part about these early days is how they hint at the duality that would define the rest of their story. On one hand, there was innocence, a raw, unpolished passion for music and expression. On the other, there was already an edge, a toughness born from hardship, a refusal to bow down to circumstances. It was this combination that made them different from others chasing the same dream. Where many would falter under the weight of rejection, they seemed to transform setbacks into fuel, each failure sharpening their focus, each criticism thickening their skin. It wasn't arrogance, it was survival instinct, and it would soon become one of the most important tools in their rise. Even in these early years, whispers of controversy began to circle. Rumours of clashes with authority figures, stories of a temper that sometimes flared, or of an ego that seemed too large for someone not yet known outside their community. Some saw these traits as flaws, while others recognized them as signs of the fiery personality that would later captivate millions. These contradictions, the sensitive dreamer and the rebellious fighter, would continue to battle inside them, and that tension would shape not just their career, but their legacy. What seemed like minor struggles back then were actually previews of the drama and intensity that would later play out on a much larger stage. What makes this first chapter so captivating is the reminder that greatness often grows in the most unlikely places. The image of a young artist scribbling lyrics in a dimly lit room pouring emotions onto paper while the rest of the world sleeps, is as powerful as any stadium performance. The fact that they carried on despite ridicule, despite financial strain, despite the constant pressure to choose a safer path, reveals a kind of courage that few possess. It wasn't about being fearless. They felt fear deeply. It was about refusing to let fear dictate the outcome, and that refusal, that stubbornness, would become the cornerstone of their identity. By the time they started making their first moves toward recognition, the groundwork had already been laid. Their story wasn't built on sudden luck. It was forged through years of invisible labor. Every rejection letter, every closed door, every late-night self-doubt session became part of the armor they carried. And while the world would eventually see the finished product, an artist at the height of fame, this first chapter ensures we never forget where it all began, with a dream that seemed too big for the world around them, and the determination to prove that no dream is too big if you're willing to fight for it. And yet, as powerful as these beginnings were, they were only the start. Because just as soon as they began to carve out their place, the challenges multiplied. The whispers grew louder, the expectations heavier, and the world beyond their small circle began to take notice. What happened next would take that fragile dream and throw it into a whirlwind of opportunity, danger, and choices that would change everything forever. Every story worth telling starts with a spark, something that makes you lean in closer because you just know there's more beneath the surface. When it comes to this artist, that spark comes from the fact that their life has never followed a predictable script. From the very beginning, they carried a presence that demanded attention, yet the world had no idea how far that presence would reach, or how many twists and turns would shape it. Success didn't simply arrive at their doorstep. It was clawed, fought, and earned in ways that left scars as well as triumphs. And if you think their journey was a straight line to fame, you'd be wrong. It was more like a storm, chaotic and wild, with flashes of brilliance lighting up the darkest skies. What makes this story so gripping isn't just the victories, though there are plenty of those, but the hidden moments, the rumours whispered in back rooms, the controversies that kept their name in headlines, and the personal battles that nobody saw coming. These layers make the narrative less about an idol on a pedestal, and more about a human being caught in the push and pull of ambition, flaws, and the weight of expectations. As you listen, you'll discover that every chapter in their life added something new, something unexpected. One moment they were celebrated, the next they were criticised, and through it all they kept moving, sometimes stumbling, sometimes running headfirst into storms, but never stopping. That's what sets this story apart. It's not clean, it's not polished, it's raw and unpredictable. And in that rawness lies the hook that keeps you invested, because deep down we all recognise that the most captivating stories aren't perfect. They're messy, dramatic, and filled with secrets waiting to be revealed. By the time we reach the end, you'll realise that what you thought you knew was only the surface, and the real story, the one hidden in rumours, choices, and consequences, was far more compelling. Section 2 marks the shift from raw beginnings into the first signs of recognition, the moment where passion starts to collide with opportunity, and the dream begins to feel less like fantasy and more like a dangerous reality. After years of obscurity, the late nights, and the endless hours of practice that no one applauded, the artist began to catch the eyes and ears of people who mattered. This wasn't fame, not yet, but it was the spark, the small but undeniable acknowledgement that their voice, their style, their energy was too strong to remain hidden. It began, as it so often does, with local performances and underground appearances, the kind of shows where the audience might be half empty, but those who were there couldn't forget what they witnessed. Even in small venues, their stage presence seemed too big for the space. That magnetic quality was what started to separate them from the countless others who shared the same ambition. They weren't just performing, they were commanding, pulling attention without asking, leaving people wondering who exactly they had just witnessed. It didn't take long for these performances to circulate beyond the rooms themselves. In an era where word of mouth could spread faster than anyone realised, stories of this artist's raw energy began to surface, and recordings, rough, sometimes low quality, started to make their way into the hands of people in the industry. Managers, producers, and scouts who'd been sifting through endless mediocrity suddenly found themselves confronted with a voice and presence that refused to be ignored. But recognition wasn't immediate acceptance. The music world is cutthroat, filled with people who dismiss more than they embrace, and at first many weren't sure what to make of them. They didn't fit neatly into a box. Their style blended influences in ways that felt both rebellious and refreshing. To some it was brilliance, to others it was too raw, too unpredictable, and in that divide lay the beginning of a reputation, one that would eventually fuel both adoration and controversy. Still, while the industry hesitated, the underground culture embraced them. Fans in those early days weren't drawn by polish or perfection. They were drawn by authenticity. Every lyric sounded lived. Every performance felt urgent. These weren't songs sung for commercial approval. They were declarations, almost confrontational in their honesty. It was this raw authenticity that made their small but growing audience fiercely loyal. The fans who discovered them in this stage felt like they had uncovered a secret, something real in a world of manufactured sounds. That bond would become a weapon later, when the wider industry finally came knocking. Because by then, they wouldn't just be an artist looking for validation. They would already have an army of supporters who believed in them before anyone else did. But with recognition came new challenges. The artist was no longer invisible, and with visibility came scrutiny. Old friends and local rivals started spreading rumours, claims that they were arrogant, that success had gone to their head, that they weren't as authentic as they claimed. These rumours, though sometimes baseless, began to feed into the larger narrative that would soon surround them, that they were polarising, impossible to ignore but also impossible to neatly categorise. At the same time, industry figures began to circle, each one seeing potential, but each one also wanting to mould, to polish, to change. It was here that the artist faced one of the earliest tests of their career. Would they bend to the pressures of the industry machine, or would they cling to the rough-edged authenticity that had gotten them this far? Their refusal to conform, even when tempted with promises of faster fame, became one of the defining choices of this stage. It slowed their rise in some ways, but it also solidified their reputation as someone unwilling to compromise their identity. This unwillingness to play by the rules only deepened their bond with the fans. To the audience watching from the outside, it looked like bravery, the kind of authenticity that is rare in a world where most people sell out for the first paycheck. Every time they turned down an easy path, every time they doubled down on being themselves, they became more mythic in the eyes of their supporters. But it also came with costs. Industry doors closed, opportunities vanished, and whispers about them being difficult started to spread. Yet even in these setbacks, they found fuel. Every rejection only sharpened their focus. Every dismissal only gave them more reason to prove themselves. This was where their resilience, born in the struggles of their early life, began to pay off in ways the world would soon witness. Of course, it wasn't just rejection that defined this stage. There were moments of breakthrough, small victories that seemed insignificant at the time but would later prove monumental. A track that went viral on underground blogs, a performance that earned them a standing ovation, a collaboration with another rising artist who recognized their potential. These moments built momentum. Each one was a stepping stone, pulling them further away from obscurity and closer to a stage big enough to match their energy. These were the moments where fans began to whisper, not just about talent, but about inevitability. It wasn't a matter of if they would break through, but when. And yet, with momentum came controversy. As their audience grew, so did the scrutiny. Critics began to dissect their lyrics, looking for hidden meanings, for controversy, for reasons to dismiss or elevate them. Rumours about their personal life started to surface, some true, some wildly fabricated. Stories of clashes with other artists, of volatile relationships, of wild behaviour offstage began to build a mythology around them. This mythology, though sometimes damaging, also made them fascinating. People weren't just listening to the music anymore, they were following the story, eager to know what would happen next. And in the age of headlines and gossip, being fascinating was sometimes more powerful than being flawless. What makes this section so compelling is the sense of tension it carries. On one side, there is undeniable momentum, the steady climb from obscurity to recognition. On the other, there are pitfalls, controversies, and doubts that could have easily derailed everything. It was a balancing act, one that demanded as much cunning as it did talent. For the artist, every day felt like both an opportunity and a test. Prove yourself, or lose it all. And what makes this stage even more captivating is that it wasn't just about proving themselves to others, it was also about proving themselves to themselves. Could they withstand the pressures, the temptations, the criticisms, without losing sight of the dream that started it all? By the time this section of their journey closed, it was clear that they were no longer just another ambitious dreamer. They had become a presence, a figure people couldn't ignore, someone who stirred conversation, loyalty, and debate. They had built the foundation for a career that would not only thrive on talent, but also on the drama and unpredictability of everything surrounding them. And as powerful as this stage was, it was only a prelude to what was coming next, because the spark of recognition had been lit, and now it was only a matter of time before that spark grew into a blaze that would set the entire industry on fire. Section 3 is where the spark turns into a blaze, where the whispers of talent become too loud for the industry to ignore, and where the artist finally begins to break into the wider public consciousness. What started as underground buzz and scattered rumours of a raw, untamable talent now began to take shape as a real force, one that couldn't be contained within the small venues and niche circles that had once been their stage. This was the era of the first true breakthrough, the kind of breakthrough that every artist dreams about but few ever experience. It didn't happen overnight, though it sometimes looked that way from the outside. Instead, it was the result of years of groundwork. Every sleepless night writing, every small crowd performance, every door that had been slammed in their face. All of those struggles condensed into a moment when preparation met opportunity, and the world finally began to watch. The breakthrough came in the form of a track, a performance, or maybe a combination of both, something that cut through the noise of a crowded industry. It wasn't just another song, it was a declaration, a statement so strong it couldn't be ignored. Listeners described it as electric, something that carried raw emotion but also undeniable confidence. For the first time, critics who had dismissed them as too rough or too rebellious were forced to acknowledge that there was real brilliance behind the chaos. The track spread quickly, bouncing from underground blogs to mainstream platforms, and soon it was no longer just their loyal base talking, it was everyone. The media wanted to know who this person was, how they had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, and whether they were just another flash in the pan or a force built to last. With that attention came opportunities that had once seemed unreachable. Doors that had been firmly closed before now swung open. Producers who had brushed them aside were suddenly eager to collaborate. Record labels, sensing the growing momentum, began making offers, each one promising a path to greater stardom. For the artist, this period was both exhilarating and dangerous. On one hand, it was validation, proof that the years of struggle and rejection had not been in vain. On the other, it was a battlefield of choices, each one with the potential to shape or shatter their career. The offers came with strings attached, requests to soften the edges, to become more marketable, to tone down the very qualities that had built their following in the first place. This was the moment where the temptation to compromise clashed with the stubborn authenticity that had defined them so far. Rather than bowing to the pressures, the artists leaned harder into their identity. They doubled down on the qualities that made them unique, the raw emotion, the unfiltered honesty, the refusal to fit into a neat box. This decision was risky, but it paid off. Fans rallied even harder, sensing that they were witnessing someone who would not sell out, someone who would fight to stay real in a world of facades. That kind of loyalty is rare, and it became one of their greatest strengths. It also cemented their reputation as a polarizing figure. Critics and industry figures who wanted predictability grew frustrated, while audiences hungry for authenticity found themselves drawn in closer. The more controversy swirled, the more the myth of the artist grew. But success at this level came with new costs. The media attention that elevated them also invaded their privacy. Every move was suddenly documented, every word dissected. Rumours multiplied, with stories about feuds, relationships, and behind-the-scenes chaos spreading faster than the music itself. Some of these stories were true, fueled by the artist's fiery personality and refusal to play by the rules. Others were complete fabrications, invented by tabloids eager to ride the wave of interest. Either way, the effect was the same. Their life became a spectacle, and their name a constant source of fascination. What should have been a time of celebration also became a time of pressure, as the weight of public expectation grew heavier with each passing day. Yet even in the midst of this chaos, the artist thrived on stage, Performances became their sanctuary, the one place where the noise of gossip and controversy faded, and the focus returned to what mattered most, the connection between them and the audience. These performances were not polished or perfect. They were raw, explosive, sometimes unpredictable, but that was exactly what made them unforgettable. Fans never knew what to expect, and that unpredictability became part of the draw. One night might bring a flawless delivery that left the crowd breathless. The next might descend into chaos with technical mishaps or emotional outbursts stealing the show. Either way, people talked, and the legend grew. Behind the scenes, though, the growing fame took its toll. The artist wrestled with exhaustion, with the relentless pace of the industry, and with the constant demand to deliver. Fame, as intoxicating as it was, began to show its darker side. Friends from earlier days sometimes drifted away, unable to adjust to the new reality. Family members, once close, now found themselves at a distance, either physically or emotionally. Even within the industry, trust became a rare commodity. Everyone wanted something: money, connections, influence, and the artist often found themselves surrounded by people whose loyalty felt conditional. This loneliness, hidden behind the bright lights of fame, was one of the most difficult challenges of this stage. At the same time, the controversies escalated. The artist's refusal to conform made them a target, and every misstep, real or imagined, was amplified. Headlines screamed about reckless behavior, about feuds with other artists, about wild nights that sometimes overshadowed the music itself. For some, this tarnished their reputation, but for others, it only made them more fascinating. The drama became inseparable from the art, and fans found themselves hooked not just on the music, but on the narrative of chaos surrounding it. In a strange way, the controversies fueled their fame, keeping them constantly in the spotlight, even when they weren't releasing new material. What makes this section so compelling is the duality. The artist was rising higher than ever, yet simultaneously walking a razor's edge. Success was undeniable, but so was the fragility of it all. One wrong move, one bad choice, could have sent everything crashing down, and yet they seemed almost addicted to that danger, as if thriving in the chaos was part of what kept them going. It was this ability to dance with disaster, to live on the edge without falling off, that made them magnetic. Fans couldn't look away, and even critics who disliked them couldn't deny the fascination. By the end of this stage, it was clear that the artist had moved beyond being a rising star. They were now a cultural figure, someone whose influence extended beyond music into fashion, lifestyle, and conversation. People weren't just listening, they were watching, dissecting, arguing, obsessing. Every move mattered, every word carried weight. And while this newfound status brought incredible opportunities, it also brought incredible risks. The foundation had been built, the blaze was burning, and now the only question left was how long they could keep feeding the fire without being consumed by it themselves. This is the tension that defined Section 3, the unstoppable rise paired with the looming shadow of collapse. It was the point where the artist stopped being just an individual chasing a dream and became a phenomenon, a story larger than themselves. And as powerful as this moment was, it was only setting the stage for what came next, even greater heights, even deeper controversies, and the kind of legacy that could only be written by someone willing to gamble everything in pursuit of more. Section 4 marks the transition from meteoric success into the turbulent, often unforgiving reality of fame, where behind every standing ovation and chart-topping hit lies pressure, conflict, and the whispers of controversy that refuse to be silenced. The artist had already proven that they could capture attention, that they had the talent, charisma, and presence to dominate any stage. But as recognition grew, so did the complexity of their life. Suddenly, every move was scrutinized, every word picked apart, and the balance between authenticity and expectation became a high-stakes game that few could survive. This is where the first major cracks began to appear, subtle at first, almost invisible to casual observers, but significant enough to set the stage for challenges that would define their public and private life. One of the first indicators of these emerging tensions came from industry insiders who noticed that while the artist's talent was undeniable, their refusal to conform or follow prescribed paths created friction. Managers, producers, and collaborators often clashed with them over creative control, marketing decisions, and the image being projected to the public. While most artists would have compromised, choosing expediency over integrity, they refused to bow. Each argument, each stand, only intensified their reputation as unpredictable, difficult, and uncompromising. To some this was admirable, to others it was alarming. The tension between creative freedom and commercial expectation became a constant thread in their career, a source of both innovation and conflict. Meanwhile, their personal life began to intersect more visibly with the spotlight, creating narratives that would dominate headlines for years to come. Relationships, once private, were now fodder for speculation, and the lines between personal and professional became increasingly blurred. Rumours of secret liaisons, public disputes, and dramatic breakups started to circulate, sometimes fueled by real events, and other times by fabrication or exaggeration. Fans and critics alike were drawn to these stories because they humanized the artist in a way that performance alone could not. Yet this intrusion into private matters also amplified pressure, forcing them to navigate a world in which trust was rare and scrutiny constant. Every choice, every interaction carried the risk of being misinterpreted or sensationalized, and the weight of that pressure was immense. Amid this turbulence, creative output did not falter, but it became a reflection of the chaos surrounding them. Albums and singles during this period often carried layers of emotion, tension, and intensity that resonated with fans while confounding critics. Lyrics hinted at personal struggle, frustration with industry politics, and reflections on fame's double-edged nature. Performances became more theatrical, sometimes unpredictable, as if the stage itself was both an outlet and a battleground. Fans were captivated not just by music, but by the palpable energy of someone grappling with immense pressure, and that energy only deepened their mythos. Yet with every moment of brilliance, the potential for collapse loomed larger, and the tension between creativity and personal cost became ever more pronounced. Conflict extended beyond management and media scrutiny into direct rivalries with other artists. While competition is a natural aspect of the industry, these clashes were heightened by the artist's refusal to adhere to unspoken rules. Feuds erupted, sometimes public, sometimes whispered through industry channels, and each incident contributed to the sense that the artist was as polarizing as they were brilliant. Social media, paparazzi, and gossip columns amplified these rivalries, often exaggerating them for dramatic effect. The artist, already navigating immense pressure, was now forced to respond to narratives that were not entirely their own, further complicating the balance between personal identity and public perception. Additionally, the relentless pace of work, tours, recordings, interviews, appearances, exacerbated stress and fatigue. Sleep deprivation, travel, and high expectations created a pressure cooker environment in which mistakes were magnified and tensions ran high. Emotional volatility became more visible, sometimes interpreted by the public as arrogance or unpredictability, sometimes as a genuine struggle to cope. Insider accounts suggested that relationships with colleagues were strained, friendships tested, and moments of doubt increasingly common. In this environment, even minor disagreements could escalate into significant conflicts, further feeding media narratives of instability. At the same time, the artist's defiance and authenticity continued to fuel loyalty among fans. Their refusal to be tamed or to sacrifice personal expression became a hallmark of their brand. Fans saw them not just as a performer, but as a symbol of independence, courage, and authenticity. Every argument with a manager, every public feud, every headline about controversy reinforced the idea that the artist was uncompromising, and in the eyes of supporters, that uncompromising nature was a virtue. It created a paradoxical dynamic. While critics and insiders often warned about the dangers of their behaviour, fans elevated it as evidence of genuine artistry. The media played a crucial role in magnifying these tensions. Headlines emphasized scandal over nuance, and minor missteps were often framed as catastrophic errors. Rumours, true, false, or somewhere in between, circulated widely, shaping public perception and adding layers of intrigue to the artist's persona. In some cases, this coverage fueled growth, as controversy increased visibility and engagement. In other cases, it introduced reputational risks that required careful navigation. The artist's ability to continue producing work that resonated despite, or sometimes because of, the surrounding drama became a defining aspect of this stage. By the end of this period, the artist had established themselves as more than just a talented performer. They were a cultural phenomenon. Their work and persona had become inseparable from controversy and intrigue, creating a narrative in which every song, every performance, and every decision carried meaning beyond the immediate moment. Yet this stage also marked the beginning of long-term challenges. The pressures of fame, the intensity of scrutiny, and the consequences of personal and professional conflict would continue to shape their trajectory in ways both visible and unseen. Section 4, therefore, represents the crucial pivot from early success to the complex high-stakes world of sustained fame. The artist's journey demonstrates that while talent and charisma can ignite a career, navigating the pressures, conflicts, and public scrutiny that accompany recognition is an entirely different challenge. The choices made during this time, how to handle conflict, maintain authenticity, and protect oneself while remaining in the public eye, would define the trajectory of the career and set the stage for both triumphs and setbacks that lay ahead. It was a period of revelation, testing, and consolidation, and the lessons learned would reverberate throughout the rest of their story, shaping not only the person the public saw, but the enduring legacy they were beginning to build. Section 5 begins at the point where the artist's life, now fully in the public eye, becomes inseparable from controversy. By this stage, they had already achieved recognition, captured a dedicated fan base, and begun to leave an undeniable mark on the industry. Yet fame, as they quickly learned, is never without cost, and with success came scrutiny of an intensity that few are prepared to endure. The world was no longer interested solely in the music. They were fascinated by the story, the personality, the choices, and the moments of chaos that seemed to follow the artist everywhere. Each headline, every rumour, every whispered scandal added another layer to the myth, and the distinction between truth and speculation became increasingly difficult for the public to discern. The artist, who had once operated in the relative obscurity of underground stages and late-night practice rooms, now faced a spotlight that magnified every action, every misstep, and every human flaw. The controversies of this period were as varied as they were relentless. There were public disagreements with peers and industry figures, often stemming from the artist's refusal to conform or follow conventional expectations. Every interaction, even those intended to be collaborative, could spiral into a headline, framed in a way that emphasized drama and conflict. Media outlets thrived on these stories, and the artist's name became synonymous with unpredictability, rebellion, and sometimes defiance. While many criticized their behavior as reckless or arrogant, fans interpreted the same actions as authenticity, a refusal to compromise in a world that demanded perfection. This dichotomy fueled public fascination, keeping audiences engaged and invested in not only their music, but also the narrative that surrounded their every move. Personal life during this stage also became a central point of discussion. Relationships, private struggles, and social circles were scrutinized, often misrepresented and sensationalized. Rumours circulated about intense breakups, secret alliances, and private conflicts that no outsider could verify. While some were exaggerated or outright fabricated, others had roots in reality, amplified by the media and gossip networks. This constant attention created an environment of pressure, where even the smallest personal choices could ignite controversy. Despite these challenges, the artists maintained a careful balance, leveraging the attention to strengthen their connection with fans while navigating the intense public gaze. Professionally, the controversies were not purely destructive. They also shaped the artist's trajectory in powerful ways. The narrative of unpredictability, rebellion, and resilience added to their mystique, turning each new release into an event rather than just music. Albums, singles, and performances were received not just for their artistic merit, but for the context in which they emerged. How the artist had confronted rumours, handled public scrutiny, and transformed personal turmoil into creative expression. Fans were drawn to the authenticity embedded in both the art and the persona, creating a cycle where controversy and creativity fueled each other. Amid these storms, the artist also faced challenges behind the scenes that were largely invisible to the public. Creative disagreements, contractual pressures, and disputes over control of their work became increasingly common. Some industry professionals sought to mould them into a more palatable figure, while others wanted to exploit the narrative of scandal for profit. The artist resisted attempts to be sanitized or packaged, insisting on retaining creative control and authenticity. This insistence earned respect from certain quarters and resentment from others, reinforcing the duality of their public image as both a genius and a troublemaker. One of the defining elements of this period was the artist's ability to turn adversity into narrative advantage. Controversies that might have derailed others were transformed into opportunities to assert identity, express artistic vision, and strengthen fan loyalty. Each rumour or scandal was met not with silence or apology alone, but with calculated responses, often creative in nature, that reinforced their image as a bold, unapologetic figure. This strategy required careful navigation. Missteps could be costly, but when executed effectively, it amplified influence and deepened engagement. The personal toll of this stage cannot be understated. Navigating constant attention, rumours, and expectations imposed a psychological weight that influenced both behaviour and creative output. The artist's work began to reflect these pressures, with lyrics, performances, and public statements often containing hints of struggle, defiance, and resilience. Fans and critics alike were drawn to this blend of brilliance and vulnerability, finding connection in the authenticity of someone who experienced fame and chaos in raw human terms. While the controversies generated tension and risk, they also made the artist's output richer, more compelling, and impossible to ignore. Additionally, this period revealed the power dynamics inherent in fame. Relationships with collaborators, peers, and even management were tested as ambition and ego clashed. Conflicts arose from differences in vision, personal clashes, or the desire to control narratives. Some feuds escalated publicly, feeding into the media's appetite for sensationalism. Others remained private, simmering beneath the surface, but still influencing decisions and alliances. The artist had to navigate a world where loyalty was conditional, alliances could shift overnight, and perception often mattered as much as reality. Learning to manage this intricate web of relationships became crucial to sustaining both career and personal stability. Ultimately, the controversies of this period were formative, shaping the artist's persona and reinforcing themes that would define their career. They learned that visibility came with both power and vulnerability, that authenticity could inspire loyalty, while also attracting criticism, and that every action, on stage, in interviews or in private life, had the potential to become part of the public narrative. The interplay of scandal, success, and personal choice created a rich, dynamic story that continued to captivate audiences. Fans, drawn by charisma and talent, stayed invested because they witnessed not only music, but also a human being grappling with the extraordinary pressures of fame. As this stage progressed, it became clear that controversy was not merely a byproduct of success. It was intertwined with the artist's identity and creative expression. The ability to navigate, manipulate, and even leverage these controversies without losing authenticity became one of their defining strengths. While some criticized the chaos, others recognized it as an essential element of what made the artist compelling, a figure who refused to be molded, who embraced imperfection, and who turned the scrutiny of millions into a canvas for expression. Section 5, therefore, captures a critical chapter where fame, scrutiny, and controversy intersect, shaping the trajectory of the artist's life in ways that are both compelling and instructive. The period demonstrates how talent alone is rarely enough, how public perception can amplify both success and struggle, and how an artist's choices in the face of controversy can define legacy. It sets the stage for further challenges, reinventions, and the complex interplay between personal vulnerability and public myth-making that will continue to define their story in the chapters ahead. Section 6 marks the beginning of a period where the price of fame became impossible to ignore, where the relentless demands of success collided with personal vulnerabilities, and where the artist's journey shifted from simply navigating opportunity to enduring the intense pressures of life under a global spotlight. By this stage, they were no longer just a rising star or a figure of fascination. They had become a phenomenon, a subject of constant scrutiny, admiration, and criticism. Every action, whether on stage or off, was dissected, magnified, and debated, creating a life in which privacy was a luxury that no longer existed. The exhilaration of recognition was accompanied by stress, anxiety, and the gnawing awareness that each misstep could have disproportionate consequences. This stage was less about discovery and more about survival, testing the artist in ways that extended far beyond music. The first signs of the toll became visible in their personal behaviour. Exhaustion from constant travel, relentless recording schedules, and high-pressure performances began to manifest in both subtle and obvious ways. Late-night sessions turned into late-night spirals of doubt, irritation, and emotional volatility. Friends and collaborators noticed moments of mood swings, impatience, and frustration that were atypical compared to the early days of raw enthusiasm. While these traits had sometimes fueled creativity before, now they were exacerbated by the relentless pace of fame. Every interaction carried the potential for misinterpretation. Every public appearance became an arena where personal fatigue collided with public expectation. The artist was being stretched in every direction, and yet they continued to push forward, driven by ambition, fear of irrelevance, and a deeply ingrained sense of identity tied to their work. Professional conflicts grew more pronounced during this period. Producers, managers, and label executives often sought to control aspects of the artist's career, altering the style, managing public appearances, and crafting a persona that was considered commercially viable. These attempts at influence clashed with the artist's fiercely independent nature, creating ongoing tensions behind the scenes. Meetings meant to strategize marketing or tours sometimes devolved into heated arguments over creative direction, deadlines, and image. In many cases, the artist's refusal to compromise became both a point of admiration and a source of friction. Those who respected talent and authenticity lauded their courage, while others saw obstinacy or recklessness, often framing it as evidence that the artist was difficult or unmanageable. Amid the professional pressures, personal relationships also began to strain under the weight of public scrutiny. Friends from earlier periods struggled to navigate their new roles, unsure how to maintain genuine connection when every conversation might be reported or misinterpreted. Romantic relationships became public property, with every intimate detail, disagreement, or split amplified in the media. These pressures created isolation, leaving the artist to grapple with a sense of loneliness even when surrounded by people. The paradox of fame, that one can be adored by millions while feeling profoundly alone, was fully realized during this period. Emotional exhaustion intertwined with external expectations, forcing the artist to develop coping mechanisms, sometimes constructive, sometimes destructive. Despite the mounting pressure, creativity did not wane. In fact, much of their work during this stage reflected the inner turbulence, the friction between personal struggle and public expectation. Lyrics and performances were infused with intensity, vulnerability, and raw emotion, resonating deeply with fans who recognized both the authenticity and the human cost behind the artistry. Every release became an event, not only for its artistic value but for the narrative of endurance and survival embedded within it. The combination of artistic brilliance and the visible strain of fame only heightened audience fascination, reinforcing the mythos surrounding the artist while underscoring the personal stakes of every decision. Controversies continued to punctuate this stage, further complicating life under the spotlight. Feuds with other artists, disagreements with collaborators, and publicized incidents became markers of the high-stakes environment in which the artist operated. The media, eager for drama, often amplified these events, sometimes distorting facts or omitting context. Rumors, both true and fabricated, spread rapidly, creating an environment in which the artist had to be constantly vigilant, strategically reactive, and emotionally resilient. The constant feedback loop of public attention, criticism, and expectation became both a tool for influence and a source of pressure. Yet, paradoxically, the very challenges that threatened to destabilize the artist's life also fortified their presence. The adversity demonstrated a form of resilience that fans and observers found compelling. Every conflict navigated, every scandal endured, every rumor weathered added depth to their narrative. This resilience was not just a survival mechanism, it became part of the brand, part of the allure, and part of the enduring fascination with their persona. Fans interpreted these moments not simply as personal struggle, but as proof of authenticity and courage, reinforcing loyalty and engagement even as pressures mounted. The psychological dimension of this stage cannot be overstated. Living constantly under the microscope created layers of stress that permeated every aspect of life. Decisions had to be calculated not just for artistic value, but also for their potential reception. Interactions with fans, collaborators, and media representatives were filtered through the lens of both opportunity and risk. Small personal choices had the potential to cascade into significant consequences, and the artist had to navigate these with a combination of intuition, experience, and endurance. The duality of being a human with vulnerabilities and a public figure with obligations created a tension that defined this period as one of both immense growth and immense challenge. Financial pressures, though often less visible, also shaped this stage. Rapid success brought wealth, but also obligations, contracts, touring costs, investments, and the expectations of both management and fans. Mismanagement or rushed decisions could threaten stability, adding another layer of stress. The artist had to learn quickly how to balance creative ambitions with practical realities, often making high-stakes decisions with long-term implications. Each choice carried potential reward but also risk, reinforcing the sense that every moment of this stage was pivotal. By the end of this period, the artist had firmly established themselves not just as a creative force but as a figure whose life embodied the dual nature of fame, exhilarating, empowering, and intoxicating on one hand, isolating, demanding, and relentless on the other. The pressures, conflicts, and personal costs of this stage left indelible marks on both their personality and their career. They had survived a period that might have broken less resilient individuals, and in doing so, had strengthened the very qualities, tenacity, defiance, and creativity that would define the next stages of their journey. Section 6, therefore, captures the artist at a critical inflection point, navigating the full weight of fame and the complexity of its personal, professional, and psychological demands. It demonstrates that talent alone is insufficient for enduring the intensity of the spotlight, and highlights the intricate balance required to maintain authenticity while managing both internal and external pressures. This stage sets the stage for subsequent developments, where resilience, controversy, and creativity continue to interact in ways that will shape the artist's legacy for years to come. Section 7 marks a period where the artist's career, already shaped by talent, controversy, and public fascination, becomes increasingly defined by rivalries, betrayals, and the complex dynamics of relationships both inside and outside the industry. By this stage, the early struggles, breakthroughs, and challenges of fame had transformed the artist into a force that could not be ignored, yet that very prominence also made them a target. The world around them, competitors, collaborators, and even supposed allies, saw opportunities to exploit, to challenge, or to capitalize on the power and attention the artist commanded. Rivalries emerged not merely from ego, but from the collision of ambition, envy, and the high-stakes environment of the industry. These conflicts would shape public perception, influence career decisions, and add layers of intrigue and drama that kept audiences captivated. From the outside, many of these rivalries appeared almost theatrical, as though the artist's life had been scripted for maximum tension. Feuds with peers erupted over seemingly minor incidents, comments taken out of context, competition for recognition, disagreements over collaborations, but beneath the surface lay deeper dynamics. These were battles over influence, creative territory, and legacy. In some cases, the rivalries were fueled by the media, which amplified disagreements and sometimes manufactured confrontations to feed public curiosity. In others, the conflicts were genuine, born from differences in vision, personality clashes, or perceived slights. Regardless of origin, the impact on the artist was profound, affecting decisions, mental state, and public persona. Betrayal became an ever-present theme. Early collaborators who had promised loyalty sometimes shifted alliances when it became clear that the artist's trajectory might eclipse their own. Management teams that initially supported the artist occasionally attempted to assert control, undermining autonomy in ways that felt personal. Friends and acquaintances drawn to proximity to fame sometimes revealed motivations that were opportunistic rather than genuine. Each betrayal, whether public or private, tested the artist's resilience and forced them to navigate a labyrinth of trust and suspicion. They became adept at reading intentions, at recognizing who would stand by them and who would exploit moments of vulnerability. Yet even as they strengthened their ability to protect themselves, the emotional toll of repeated betrayal left its mark, shaping both behavior and art. Amid this turbulence, the artist's public persona thrived on the energy of rivalry and conflict. Fans were drawn to the drama not only because it was entertaining, but because it reinforced the image of the artist as fearless, uncompromising, and authentic. Every feud or confrontation became a story of courage, a demonstration of unwillingness to bow to industry norms or peer pressure. In this sense, rivalries were not merely challenges, they were extensions of the artist's brand, reinforcing loyalty and engagement, while also contributing to the mythology that surrounded them. The interplay between public fascination and personal struggle created a cycle in which controversy, rivalry, and creativity fed each other, amplifying both success and tension. However, the stakes of these conflicts were high. Some rivalries risked damaging professional relationships or limiting opportunities. Collaborators who might have enhanced the artist's work sometimes became estranged, reducing access to resources or networks. Public disputes sometimes invited legal scrutiny, negative press, or social media backlash, requiring careful navigation to protect reputation and career trajectory. The artist learned quickly that the balance between defending integrity and fueling unnecessary conflict was delicate. Miscalculations could have long-term repercussions. At the same time, these challenges highlighted the artist's strategic thinking. They became increasingly skilled at using conflicts to their advantage, whether by leveraging attention to promote work, asserting creative control, or demonstrating resilience in the face of adversity. Public disagreements were often framed in ways that emphasized personal integrity, while subtle manipulations behind the scenes ensured that they maintained agency over narrative and outcome. This strategic approach did not eliminate risk, but it allowed the artist to convert potential setbacks into moments of opportunity and growth. Interpersonal dynamics extended beyond rivalries with peers. Relationships with industry executives, managers, and advisors were fraught with negotiation and power struggles. These interactions required constant vigilance, as decisions made in the boardroom could have ripple effects on creative direction, touring opportunities, and financial outcomes. Even friendships were influenced by proximity to power, as those close to the artist navigated their own ambitions alongside loyalty. The emotional labor of maintaining trust while protecting oneself became a continuous challenge, demanding both intelligence and resilience. Creatively, this stage also proved transformative. Rivalries and betrayals, while personally taxing, became sources of inspiration. Lyrics, performances, and public statements often reflected the tension, conflict, and intensity of the artist's surroundings. Fans connected deeply to this authenticity, interpreting the work not merely as entertainment but as a window into a person navigating extraordinary pressures. Each artistic output during this period carried weight beyond its technical merit, imbued with the emotional complexity of relationships, rivalry, and survival in a competitive high-stakes environment. Section 7 thus illustrates the duality of power and vulnerability that defines high-level success in the public eye. The artist's rivalries, betrayals, and alliances were simultaneously obstacles and accelerators, creating tension that challenged resilience while reinforcing the traits that made them compelling. This stage demonstrates how the intersection of personal and professional dynamics can shape both career and public perception, and how navigating these relationships requires a delicate combination of strategy, authenticity, and emotional intelligence. By the end of this stage, it was clear that the artist had moved beyond simple success or popularity. They had become a figure whose life was defined not just by talent, but by the drama of navigating complex human relationships, high-stakes competition, and the ever-present threat of betrayal. The lessons learned, the scars earned, and the strategies developed would inform every subsequent stage, influencing decisions, creative output, and the narrative that would follow them for the remainder of their career. Rivalry, conflict, and loyalty were no longer peripheral. They were central, shaping the story in ways both visible to the public and hidden behind the scenes. The stage was now set for moments of both remarkable triumph and deeply consequential challenge, as the artist continued to navigate the precarious balance between power, creativity, and humanity. Section 8 represents a period where the artist, already riding the waves of fame and navigating the complexities of rivalry and betrayal, faced a new dimension of scrutiny: public scandals and media firestorms. By now, their every move, on stage, off stage, in interviews, and even in casual appearances, was subject to intense observation. Fans, critics, and journalists alike dissected each action, searching for signs of brilliance, controversy, or vulnerability. Unlike the earlier stages, where talent and authenticity could operate with some degree of separation from public opinion, this era blurred the line entirely. Personal choices became public property, and minor incidents could snowball into major narratives that dominated conversations across social media, entertainment news, and even mainstream news outlets. The artist's life had become a stage, and the world watched with relentless curiosity, hungry for drama as much as for music. One of the defining characteristics of this stage was the amplification of both minor and major missteps. What might have been a private disagreement with a colleague or a simple error during a performance was often framed as evidence of a larger pattern of behaviour. Headlines used words that suggested chaos, instability, or recklessness, and even well-intentioned comments could be twisted into controversy. The artist had to learn quickly that perception often mattered as much as reality. A single, misinterpreted statement could dominate discussions for days, sometimes weeks, and the narrative would often take on a life of its own, independent of the artist's actual actions or intentions. This dynamic forced a level of strategic thinking in their interactions that previous stages had not required. Amid the media storms, fan reactions varied widely, creating a paradoxical effect. On one hand, some segments of the audience were outraged, viewing the reported scandals as evidence of character flaws or irresponsibility. On the other hand, many fans were captivated, interpreting the same incidents as demonstrations of authenticity, rebellion, or emotional depth. The artist's ability to evoke such polarized reactions only enhanced public interest, making them impossible to ignore. Each scandal, whether real or exaggerated, fed into the growing mythology surrounding their persona, reinforcing the narrative that they were not merely a musician but a living story, full of tension, conflict, and intrigue. A particularly challenging aspect of this stage was the interaction with other public figures. Rivalries, collaborations, and personal relationships were scrutinized, often leading to amplified interpretations of conflicts. Tweets, social media posts, and public appearances were dissected for hidden meanings, fueling speculation about feuds or alliances. The artist became adept at navigating these dynamics, sometimes responding directly, sometimes letting ambiguity generate further engagement. This strategy, while risky, allowed them to control portions of the narrative without surrendering their autonomy. And it also contributed to the sense that every move was calculated, every reaction purposeful, and every interaction part of a larger story. Behind the scenes, the pressure was intense. Constant travel, tight recording schedules, media obligations, and public appearances left little room for personal downtime. Sleep deprivation, stress, and the emotional weight of persistent scrutiny began to take a toll on both mental and physical health. Sources close to the artist reported moments of vulnerability and doubt, revealing that beneath the bravado and controlled image, there were real human struggles being navigated in private. Despite the challenges, the artist continued to perform, create, and innovate, using music and public appearances as both an outlet and a form of armor against the pressures of constant observation. Public scandals also introduced legal and financial considerations. Misinterpreted statements, alleged conflicts, or accusations, whether valid or exaggerated, required careful handling to protect reputation, career, and financial stability. Legal advisors and public relations teams became essential, guiding responses and helping to mitigate fallout. Even small miscalculations could have long-term consequences, making the artist acutely aware of the stakes in every public engagement. This environment of heightened risk created a dual reality. Creative freedom and expression were simultaneously empowered and constrained by the constant surveillance and potential for misrepresentation. Creatively, the era of scandal and firestorm proved paradoxically fruitful. The tension and drama surrounding the artist's public image often fueled inspiration, shaping lyrics, performances, and visual storytelling in ways that resonated deeply with audiences. Songs released during this period reflected themes of struggle, defiance, and resilience, connecting with listeners who saw reflections of their own challenges and emotional complexity. Fans interpreted these works as candid glimpses into the artist's life, reinforcing loyalty and engagement. Every new release became an event, a narrative extension of the real-life drama unfolding in headlines and social media feeds. The media's role during this stage cannot be overstated. Coverage was relentless and often sensationalized, with headlines crafted to maximize engagement, provoke discussion, and sometimes distort nuance. Rumors, both substantiated and fabricated, spread quickly, amplified by social media and fan communities. This created a constant feedback loop in which public perception influenced personal decisions, and personal decisions influenced public perception. The artist had to develop sophisticated media literacy, learning how to navigate attention, deflect misinterpretation, and selectively reveal information to maintain narrative control without appearing evasive or manipulative. Ultimately, Section 8 demonstrates the complex interplay between fame, controversy, and personal agency. The artist's experiences during this period show how public scrutiny can simultaneously threaten and enhance a career. The scandals and firestorms forced them to adapt, strategize, and evolve, ultimately shaping not only the trajectory of their work, but the depth and nuance of their public persona. The stakes were higher than ever, the pressure more intense, and the consequences of each action magnified exponentially. Yet within this turbulence lay opportunity, the chance to solidify identity, deepen fan engagement, and transform personal and professional adversity into enduring artistic and cultural impact. By the close of this stage, it was clear that the artist had mastered the precarious balance of thriving under pressure while maintaining creative integrity. The scandals, controversies, and media scrutiny were no longer merely obstacles. They had become defining features of their story, elements that heightened fascination, reinforced mythology, and demonstrated resilience. Section 8, therefore, captures the duality of public life at its extreme, a world where talent and controversy coexist, where every misstep is magnified, and where the artist's ability to navigate chaos determines both legacy and survival. Section 9 begins at the point where the pressures of fame, rivalry, and public scrutiny reach a crescendo, culminating in a breaking point that would test the artist in ways they had never experienced before. By now, the interplay between creative output, personal life, and media narrative had become almost inseparable. Every performance, every release, and every public appearance was weighed not only against artistic expectations, but against the constant flood of rumors, controversies, and speculation that surrounded their name. What had once been exhilarating, the thrill of attention, the surge of admiration, had transformed into a relentless storm of obligation, expectation, and scrutiny. The artist was now navigating a world in which both success and failure were magnified, where each action could either cement their reputation or unravel it entirely. The breaking point was not a single event, but rather a culmination of years of accumulated stress, pressure, and conflict. The long hours, constant travel, intense performance schedules, and relentless media attention began to take a measurable toll on their mental and physical well-being. Even tasks that were once routine, recording in the studio, interacting with collaborators, attending promotional events, became fraught with anxiety and tension. Insiders reported moments of volatility, emotional outbursts, and a deep sense of exhaustion that coloured nearly every aspect of their life. This period revealed the human side of the artist, a side that the public rarely saw: vulnerability, doubt, and the profound weight of living in a fishbowl. Compounding these pressures were ongoing rivalries and public controversies. The artist had accumulated a history of conflicts, feuds with peers, disputes with management, and tensions with industry figures that now intersected, creating a highly combustible environment. Every statement, every action, was interpreted through the lens of past controversies. Social media, fans, and critics alike dissected their behaviour, often amplifying minor incidents into full-blown narratives. The artist's ability to navigate these storms was tested repeatedly, forcing them to balance self-preservation, authenticity, and career strategy. Each decision became a tightrope walk between maintaining control over their personal and professional life, and being dragged by the momentum of external forces beyond their control. Personal relationships, once a source of grounding, were also strained to the breaking point. Friends, family, and romantic partners who had provided support during earlier stages of the artist's journey were now caught in the whirlwind of fame and controversy. Trust became increasingly scarce, as the lines between genuine loyalty and opportunism blurred. In some cases, long-standing relationships dissolved under pressure, leaving the artist isolated at precisely the time when support was most critical. This isolation, combined with public scrutiny, magnified the intensity of the breaking point, creating a perfect storm of stress and emotional vulnerability. Professionally, the stakes were higher than ever. Contracts, negotiations, and creative decisions carried the potential for both enormous reward and catastrophic fallout. The artist faced decisions that would determine not only the trajectory of their career, but also their personal integrity and sense of identity. Compromises that might have been acceptable in earlier stages were now unthinkable, yet resisting external pressures increased the risk of conflict with powerful industry figures. The tension between maintaining artistic control and navigating the commercial realities of fame became increasingly pronounced, and the artist was forced to make choices that would have long-lasting consequences for both their reputation and career trajectory. Amid these challenges, the artist's creative output remained a critical outlet. Lyrics, performances, and public statements began to reflect the intensity of their experience, often carrying layers of vulnerability, defiance, and introspection. Fans who were attuned to these nuances recognized the emotional honesty embedded in their work, deepening the connection between artist and audience. Each release became more than a musical endeavor. It was a window into the artist's internal struggle, a reflection of the pressures, conflicts, and personal battles that defined this stage. This creative transparency reinforced loyalty, even as public scrutiny intensified, and highlighted the paradoxical relationship between vulnerability and public fascination. The breaking point also exposed the complex interplay between personal agency and external forces. Rumors, public opinion, media narratives, and industry pressures created an environment in which control was never absolute. The artist had to navigate not only their own emotions and decisions, but also the expectations and interpretations of countless observers. Missteps were amplified, and even successes were sometimes overshadowed by the surrounding drama. The ability to maintain focus, assert personal boundaries, and protect mental health under such conditions required immense resilience, strategic thinking, and emotional intelligence. Scandals that emerged during this stage further complicated the narrative. Allegations, true or partially fabricated, became entwined with public perception and media framing. The artist had to respond selectively, crafting public statements, interviews, and performances that addressed controversy without compromising authenticity. Each response carried risk. Miscommunication could exacerbate the issue, while silence could be interpreted as guilt or weakness. Navigating this delicate landscape became a defining challenge, one that required constant attention, tactical decision-making, and an unwavering commitment to personal principles. Yet despite the intensity, the artist's breaking point was not solely destructive. It catalyzed reflection, growth, and transformation. Confronting the pressures, conflicts, and vulnerabilities forced the artist to refine their strategies, strengthen resilience, and clarify priorities. They learned which battles were worth fighting, which relationships were essential, and how to harness public attention to their advantage without being consumed by it. This period of extreme pressure became both a crucible and a catalyst, shaping the artist's identity and preparing them for the next stage of their career, where recovery, reinvention, and legacy would become central themes. By the conclusion of this stage, it was evident that the artist had endured more than most could imagine, yet had emerged with a deeper understanding of themselves and their environment. The breaking point highlighted the fragility and strength inherent in the journey of fame. It showed that talent and charisma can elevate an individual to extraordinary heights, but that sustaining success requires navigating intense scrutiny, conflict, and emotional strain. Section 9 thus captures the convergence of pressure, controversy, and personal vulnerability, illustrating how the artist survived the most intense challenges of early stardom and laid the groundwork for the reinventions and achievements that would follow. This period, while fraught with risk and turmoil, solidified the artist's reputation as someone who could endure extreme pressure without surrendering their identity. The lessons learned during the breaking point about resilience, public perception, and the balance between authenticity and strategy would inform every subsequent decision, shaping both creative output and personal evolution. Section 9 is a testament to the high-stakes reality of fame and the extraordinary capacity of the artist to navigate the pressures, conflicts, and complexities that accompany public life at the highest level. Section 10 represents a pivotal stage in the artist's journey, where the combination of fame, controversy, and personal growth begins to converge into a period of reinvention and strategic mastery. By this point, the early struggles, rivalries, and scandals had all shaped the public persona into one that was both magnetic and unpredictable. The audience no longer consumed only the music. They were invested in the narrative of the artist's life, the story of someone navigating intense pressures, complex relationships, and the constant glare of the public eye. This stage was marked by a conscious effort to harness that attention, to convert both the turbulence and the acclaim into a foundation for long-term influence, and to refine a vision that balanced authenticity with sustainability. One of the defining features of this period was the artist's growing ability to control narrative. The lessons of previous stages, where scandals spiraled, rivalries intensified, and private matters became public fodder, had imparted a hard-earned understanding of public perception. They began to employ strategic decision-making in every domain. Social media interactions, interviews, public appearances, and creative projects were all carefully calibrated to reinforce desired narratives without compromising artistic integrity. This strategic approach did not mean manipulation. Rather, it reflected an acute awareness of the interplay between personal action and public interpretation. By guiding how the story was told, the artist was able to maintain momentum, mitigate negative attention, and elevate positive perception, turning past turbulence into tools of influence. Creatively, this stage was both expansive and experimental. The artist leveraged the heightened attention from previous controversies and successes to explore new genres, collaborate with a diverse range of peers, and push artistic boundaries. Each project was imbued with the intensity of lived experience, combining technical skill with emotional depth that resonated deeply with audiences. Fans were drawn not only to the music, but also to the sense that the work reflected personal evolution, an authenticity born from navigating the pressures and lessons of earlier stages. This period also highlighted the artist's ability to translate personal and professional challenges into compelling narratives, making albums, singles, and performances more than entertainment. They became statements of resilience, identity, and creative authority. Behind the scenes, the artist's approach to relationships evolved. They became increasingly selective with collaborators, friends, and advisors, recognizing the importance of surrounding themselves with individuals whose loyalty, vision, and discretion aligned with their goals. Long-standing rivalries were reassessed. Some were transformed into collaborations, while others were left to dissipate, managed with a mixture of diplomacy and boundary setting. Romantic and personal relationships were also handled with greater intentionality, balancing the need for privacy with the unavoidable scrutiny of public attention. This careful curation of interpersonal dynamics allowed the artist to create a supportive environment, conducive to both creative freedom and emotional stability. Public controversies, though still present, were increasingly reframed as opportunities. The artist had learned to anticipate, manage, and even capitalize on media attention, using controversies to amplify creative releases, highlight personal principles, or strengthen fan engagement. Statements, interviews, and performances were deployed with an awareness of timing, context, and audience impact, allowing the artist to maintain authenticity while guiding the narrative in a way that reinforced reputation and influence. This period exemplified the balance between risk and reward inherent in high-profile artistry. When handled strategically, controversy could be transformed from a threat into a tool, magnifying impact and deepening cultural relevance. Financially and professionally, Section 10 reflects a phase of consolidation and expansion. Previous experiences with mismanaged opportunities and industry pressures had imparted a rigorous approach to contracts, investments, and career planning. The artist, often with trusted advisors, began to navigate opportunities with a long-term perspective, seeking projects that reinforced their artistic vision while providing sustainable growth. High-profile collaborations, brand partnerships, and ventures into adjacent industries were carefully selected to enhance influence and visibility without diluting personal brand identity. Each decision was weighted with both immediate and long-term implications in mind, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of the commercial dimensions of fame. Psychologically, the artist demonstrated significant growth during this stage. Previous stages of conflict, scandal, and relentless scrutiny had fostered both vulnerability and resilience. Now they harnessed those experiences to develop emotional intelligence, strategic patience, and a disciplined approach to stress management. The ability to maintain focus under pressure, to navigate complex social dynamics, and to translate emotional turbulence into creative energy became defining features of this period. Fans and observers noted a maturation in demeanor. While the artist retained their signature intensity and unpredictability, there was a newfound confidence and self-assuredness that reinforced credibility and authority within the industry. Performance style and public presentation also evolved. Whereas earlier stages were marked by raw energy and occasional volatility, this period emphasized precision, intentionality, and narrative cohesion. Every appearance, from live concerts to interviews, was crafted to reinforce artistic identity and public perception. Visual elements, choreography, and stagecraft were used not just for spectacle, but to convey themes of resilience, authenticity, and personal growth. The artist's performances became a medium through which both music and personal narrative were communicated, deepening engagement and cementing their place as a cultural figure whose influence extended beyond the music itself. The audience, in turn, responded to this evolution with increased loyalty and investment. Fans who had witnessed earlier struggles, controversies, and creative triumphs now perceived the artist as someone who had mastered the complex interplay between fame, personal integrity, and artistic expression. The connection was no longer based solely on admiration for talent, but on a sense of shared journey, empathy for the challenges overcome, and respect for the strategic and emotional intelligence displayed. The artist had transformed past volatility into narrative strength, and the audience recognized the depth and complexity behind every public moment. Section 10, therefore, represents a critical inflection point, the transition from reactive management of fame and controversy to proactive mastery of narrative, creativity, and influence. The artist demonstrated the capacity to integrate lessons from previous stages, handling pressure, navigating rivalry, managing scrutiny, and converting challenges into opportunity, into a coherent approach that strengthened both career trajectory and personal resilience. This stage set the foundation for long-term sustainability, expanded influence, and continued evolution, ensuring that the artist was not merely a figure of temporary fascination, but a lasting presence in the cultural and musical landscape. By the conclusion of this stage, the artist had established themselves as a master of both craft and context. The combination of creative innovation, strategic management, and emotional intelligence allowed them to navigate an increasingly complex public and professional landscape, while retaining authenticity and audience loyalty. Section 10 captures the artist at the intersection of peak potential and learned wisdom, a period of consolidation, refinement, and strategic expansion that positioned them for the challenges, triumphs, and reinventions that lay ahead. The narrative of turbulence, resilience, and mastery became inseparable from their public persona, creating a multi-dimensional figure whose story continues to captivate and inspire. Section 11 marks a period in the artist's journey where mastery, influence, and notoriety converge into a phase defined not just by creative output, but by the broader cultural impact of their persona. By this stage, the artist had already endured the turbulence of early recognition, rivalries, scandals, and the relentless pressures of fame. What had once been reactive, managing crises, navigating public perception, and asserting control, was now increasingly proactive. This phase was less about survival and more about shaping legacy, consolidating influence, and extending impact beyond music itself. The artist's ability to synthesize past experiences into strategic action became a defining characteristic, allowing them to navigate both professional opportunities and personal challenges with a combination of intuition, insight, and learned resilience. One of the defining features of this period was the expansion of the artist's influence beyond traditional music channels. Their public image, cultivated through a combination of raw authenticity, controversy, and creative daring, now carried significant cultural weight. Fans, critics, and the media alike recognized that the artist was not just producing music, they were shaping trends, influencing discourse, and setting standards for what it meant to be an artist in a modern, highly mediated environment. Their stylistic choices, public statements, and collaborations began to resonate as cultural markers, contributing to broader conversations about authenticity, artistic freedom, and the intersection of personal and professional identity. This influence created both opportunity and responsibility, as every public move could reverberate through social and cultural spheres. At the same time, this stage saw the intensification of personal and professional pressures. The artist's visibility meant that their decisions were scrutinized at an unprecedented level. Collaborators, peers, and industry executives had vested interests in influencing direction, creating tension between personal autonomy and external expectations. Rivalries from earlier stages occasionally reignited, while new conflicts emerged as the artist's prominence attracted competition, envy, and criticism. These dynamics required a sophisticated approach to relationship management, negotiation, and strategic positioning. The artist had to balance the demands of collaborators in the industry with their own creative vision, maintaining authenticity while leveraging influence to sustain momentum and growth. Creatively, the artist entered a period of experimentation and consolidation. Past experiences, rivalries, controversies, and personal challenges provided rich material for innovation. Lyrics, performances, and visual storytelling increasingly reflected themes of resilience, identity, and cultural commentary. Collaborations expanded in scope and ambition, encompassing not only other artists but also figures in fashion, media, and other creative industries. This diversification was strategic. It reinforced the artist's relevance, broadened audience reach, and solidified status as a multi-dimensional cultural figure. Each project during this stage carried intentionality, balancing artistic exploration with audience expectations and market dynamics. The public's response during this stage underscored the artist's growing influence. Fans, who had witnessed early struggles and subsequent triumphs, now engaged with the artist on multiple levels, appreciating technical skill, connecting with personal narratives, and interpreting public actions as reflections of broader cultural and social values. This engagement went beyond music consumption. It encompassed participation in discourse, speculation about persona and motives, and active involvement in cultural trends influenced by the artist. Social media amplified this engagement, creating a dynamic feedback loop in which audience perception both shaped and was shaped by the artist's actions, reinforcing relevance and cultural authority. However, the convergence of influence and visibility also heightened vulnerability. Public expectations intensified, with scrutiny extending to private behavior, public statements, and personal relationships. Any misstep could be magnified, creating controversy or negative perception that threatened credibility or momentum. The artist had to navigate these pressures while maintaining the qualities that had earned attention and loyalty in the first place: authenticity, creativity, and independence. Success required constant vigilance, strategic foresight, and emotional resilience, blending self-awareness with an acute understanding of public sentiment. Financial and professional dimensions of this stage were equally significant. By now, the artist had accumulated resources, opportunities, and leverage. But these came with complex obligations and expectations. Decisions regarding partnerships, contracts, and investments required long-term strategic thinking, balancing immediate gains with sustainable growth. Some projects demanded compromise, while others provided opportunities to assert control and influence industry standards. The artist's approach combined practical acumen with creative ambition, ensuring that professional decisions reinforced both personal vision and broader cultural impact. Psychologically, the artist demonstrated increased maturity and self-regulation. Earlier stages of turbulence had forged resilience, emotional intelligence, and strategic thinking, which now allowed the artist to navigate complex environments with greater confidence. Public scrutiny, professional rivalry, and personal pressure were still present, but the artist had developed mechanisms for managing stress, maintaining focus, and leveraging attention strategically. The ability to remain centered under pressure contributed to both creative productivity and public perception, reinforcing an image of strength, integrity, and sophistication. Performances and public appearances during this period became highly refined expressions of artistic identity. Every detail, from stage design and choreography to public statements and visual presentation, was calibrated to communicate themes of authenticity, resilience, and influence. The artist's work was no longer only about technical excellence or emotional resonance. It had become a medium for narrative construction, cultural commentary, and strategic positioning. Audiences engaged not only with music but with the stories embedded in performances, interpreting them as both entertainment and insight into the artist's evolving identity. Section 11 also emphasized the interplay between controversy and control. While scandals and media narratives had previously been reactive challenges, the artist now learned to anticipate, navigate, and even use these dynamics to their advantage. Controversial statements or incidents could be framed to reinforce artistic narrative, highlight cultural commentary, or maintain relevance. Strategic engagement with media, fans, and peers allowed the artist to convert potential threats into opportunities for influence, demonstrating sophisticated mastery over both personal and public domains. This stage solidified the artist's position as not just a performer, but a cultural force. They demonstrated that enduring influence arises from the combination of talent, authenticity, strategic intelligence, and resilience. The ability to integrate lessons from prior challenges into conscious decisions, creative output, and public engagement ensured that the artist's impact extended beyond immediate popularity into long-term cultural relevance. Every action, every performance, and every decision during this period reinforced the multidimensional nature of their persona, blending artistry with narrative mastery and cultural authority. By the conclusion of Section 11, the artist had transformed from a figure defined primarily by talent and controversy into a master of cultural influence. This stage represents the consolidation of power, creativity, and strategy, demonstrating how previous turbulence, rivalry, scandal, scrutiny can be leveraged into enduring relevance. The artist's ability to navigate complex professional, personal, and public dynamics with precision and authenticity ensured not only continued success, but also the creation of a lasting legacy. Section 11 captures this critical evolution, a period in which the artist moves from surviving the pressures of fame to commanding them, shaping culture while maintaining the core identity that made them compelling from the very beginning. Section 12 represents a phase in the artist's journey where influence, legacy, and personal transformation intersect, marking a period of reflection, reinvention, and strategic expansion. By this stage, the artist had already navigated the turbulence of early fame, rivalries, scandals, and intense scrutiny. They had endured the breaking points of pressure and controversy, and had learned to harness public attention to their advantage. What emerges in this period is a deliberate shaping of legacy, a thoughtful orchestration of public persona, and a deeper engagement with both creative ambition and personal growth. It is no longer enough to react to circumstances. The artist now proactively crafts the narrative, turning lived experience into opportunity, and transforming lessons from past challenges into tools for sustained influence. A defining characteristic of this stage is the artist's engagement with broader cultural and societal themes. Their work, while still deeply rooted in personal experience and artistic expression, begins to resonate on multiple levels, addressing topics that extend beyond music to touch on social issues, identity, and cultural commentary. This expansion of thematic scope reflects both maturity and confidence. The artist recognizes that their platform carries power and responsibility, and they intentionally leverage that influence to engage audiences in ways that are meaningful, provocative, and reflective of contemporary conversations. Each release, performance, and public statement is infused with layers of significance, inviting audiences to interpret not only the artistry, but also the broader implications of their narrative. During this period, the artist also deepens their engagement with collaborations. Rather than pursuing partnerships solely for commercial or stylistic reasons, they seek out relationships that offer mutual enrichment, creative challenge, and potential cultural impact. Collaborators are carefully selected based on shared vision, complementary strengths, and the capacity to elevate work beyond individual capability. These partnerships extend into areas such as fashion, media, and philanthropy, reflecting an understanding that influence is multifaceted and that a holistic approach to creative expression can reinforce both cultural relevance and personal fulfillment. Strategic collaborations allow the artist to reach new audiences, explore untapped creative territories, and solidify their position as a multidimensional cultural figure. Personal growth and self-awareness are central to this stage. The artist has internalized the lessons of previous periods, the vulnerabilities exposed by scandals, the consequences of rivalry, the pressures of public scrutiny, and the toll of relentless performance schedules. They now apply these lessons to manage their emotional, mental, and physical well-being more intentionally. Coping strategies, routines, and boundaries are implemented to ensure sustainability, allowing the artist to maintain creative output while protecting the integrity of personal life. This deliberate approach to self-management reflects a maturity that balances ambition with resilience, ensuring that the artist can continue to thrive in an environment that remains high pressure and highly visible. Public perception continues to be carefully managed, but with an evolved understanding. The artist recognizes that authenticity, rather than perfection, drives engagement and loyalty. Public appearances, interviews, and social media interactions are curated not to manipulate, but to communicate transparency, creative intent, and personal perspective. Audiences, having followed the artist through both triumphs and crises, respond positively to this consistency and depth. The relationship between artist and audience becomes increasingly symbiotic. Fans are engaged not only by the work itself, but by the narrative of growth, resilience, and cultural commentary that accompanies it. This dynamic reinforces loyalty, encourages sustained attention, and amplifies the artist's influence across diverse communities. Financial and professional strategy during this period becomes increasingly sophisticated. Previous experiences with mismanagement, opportunistic collaborators, and high-pressure industry environments have informed a meticulous approach to contracts, investments, and career planning. Projects are evaluated not only for immediate creative or financial gain, but also for their potential to enhance legacy, cultural relevance, and long-term influence. The artist demonstrates a keen ability to balance risk and reward, leveraging resources, relationships, and public interest to expand their platform while preserving autonomy and creative freedom. Each decision is a calculated move in a larger strategy designed to sustain relevance, influence, and personal integrity. Creatively, this period is marked by refinement and experimentation. The artist synthesizes lessons from earlier stages: turmoil, rivalry, scandal, and intense scrutiny, into work that is both sophisticated and emotionally resonant. Albums, singles, and performances explore new sonic landscapes, thematic complexity, and innovative storytelling techniques. Visual elements, narrative frameworks, and symbolic content are integrated into their projects, reflecting a multi-dimensional approach that elevates artistry beyond music alone. Fans and critics alike recognize the depth of intent, the layering of meaning, and the skillful blending of personal experience with broader cultural commentary. Each project during this stage reinforces the artist's stature as both a creative innovator and a culturally significant figure. Scandals and controversies, though less destabilizing than in earlier periods, continue to play a role. The artist has learned to navigate these moments with strategic precision, using them to reinforce narrative themes, highlight creative intentions, or deepen engagement. Public missteps, rivalries, or media scrutiny are approached with a blend of authenticity and tactical insight, ensuring that attention, whether positive or negative, serves a broader purpose. This ability to manage perception without compromising personal identity demonstrates a mastery of both public persona and professional acumen, allowing the artist to maintain influence and authority even in the face of potential challenges. Mentorship and legacy building emerge as additional dimensions of this period. the artist begins to engage with emerging talent, sharing insights, guidance, and opportunities in ways that extend their influence beyond personal work. By fostering new voices, they contribute to the cultural ecosystem while reinforcing their own stature as a figure of expertise, authority, and inspiration. This mentorship is both strategic and genuine. It amplifies the artist's cultural footprint, nurtures innovation, and demonstrates a commitment to sustainability and continuity in the creative industry. Section 12 also highlights the intersection of personal evolution and public narrative. The artist has internalized previous lessons about vulnerability, resilience, and strategic engagement, applying these insights to create a coherent, multi-dimensional identity that resonates both privately and publicly. Their life and work are now integrated in a way that allows audiences to witness not just artistic output, but the ongoing journey of growth, self-reflection, and cultural engagement. Each performance, each statement, and each creative decision reflects a deliberate intention to align personal vision with public influence. By the conclusion of this stage, the artist has successfully navigated a complex interplay of fame, scrutiny, rivalry, and personal growth to achieve a level of mastery over both craft and context. Section 12 captures a critical inflection point, a period in which strategic thinking, emotional intelligence, and creative innovation converge to solidify influence, cultural significance, and legacy. The artist demonstrates that enduring relevance is not achieved solely through talent, but through the synthesis of experience, insight, and intentional action. This stage lays the foundation for subsequent achievements, reinventions, and cultural impact, ensuring that the artist's story continues to captivate, inspire, and evolve. Section 13 represents a crucial phase in the artist's journey, where sustained success, cultural influence, and personal evolution intersect, marking a period defined by both consolidation and experimentation. By this stage, the artist has weathered the turbulence of early fame, navigated rivalries and public controversies, and mastered the complex interplay between personal identity and public perception. The lessons learned in previous stages have coalesced into a refined approach that balances creativity, strategy, and resilience. It is during this period that the artist's work begins to reflect not only technical skill and raw emotion, but also a sophisticated awareness of cultural context, audience expectation, and long-term legacy. One of the defining features of this stage is the deliberate use of narrative. The artist understands that their public persona, creative output, and personal decisions are all components of a larger story that engages audiences. Every album, single, and performance is crafted not only for its artistic merit, but also for the narrative it conveys of resilience, defiance, authenticity, and evolution. Past controversies, personal struggles, and public scrutiny are now leveraged as elements that add depth and dimension to the artist's story. This approach transforms individual actions and creative works into episodes of a larger, ongoing narrative that captivates fans and sustains interest over time. Creatively, the artist explores new dimensions of expression. They experiment with different genres, styles, and collaborative opportunities, pushing boundaries while maintaining a coherent artistic identity. The experiences of previous stages, rivalries, scandals, intense scrutiny, provide rich material that informs thematic exploration, lyrical depth, and emotional resonance. This experimentation is not random. It is strategic, guided by a desire to innovate while reinforcing authenticity. Each project becomes a statement of both personal growth and cultural relevance, reflecting the artist's understanding that creative evolution is essential for sustaining influence in a competitive, dynamic industry. Relationships continue to play a pivotal role. Collaborations are carefully curated, prioritizing partners who bring complementary skills, shared vision, and cultural relevance. The artist leverages these partnerships to expand creative possibilities, reach new audiences, and reinforce their position within the industry. At the same time, personal relationships are navigated with greater intentionality. Past experiences with betrayal, miscommunication, and the pressures of public scrutiny have honed the artist's ability to discern trustworthiness, manage boundaries, and cultivate connections that support both personal well-being and professional growth. The media and public perception remain significant factors. While earlier stages were marked by reactive responses to scandal and scrutiny, this period emphasizes proactive narrative management. The artist strategically engages with media, social platforms, and public appearances to shape perception, amplify messages, and reinforce brand identity. Controversy, when it arises, is approached with tactical consideration. Statements, performances, and interactions are used to contextualize events, redirect attention, and highlight personal values. This strategic engagement allows the artist to maintain influence, protect reputation, and ensure that public attention reinforces rather than undermines their goals. Financially and professionally, this stage demonstrates maturity and foresight. Previous experiences with mismanaged opportunities, contractual disputes, and industry manipulation have informed a careful strategic approach to career planning. Investments, collaborations, and business ventures are evaluated for both short-term benefit and long-term sustainability. The artist balances creative ambition with pragmatic considerations, ensuring that each decision supports both artistic integrity and financial stability. This disciplined approach enables the expansion of influence beyond music alone, encompassing fashion, media, branding, and cultural initiatives that reinforce relevance and authority. Psychologically, the artist exhibits significant growth. Earlier stages of vulnerability, intense pressure, and public scrutiny have cultivated resilience, emotional intelligence, and strategic thinking. The artist now applies these skills to manage the multifaceted challenges of sustained fame, balancing creativity with public expectation, navigating complex interpersonal dynamics, and maintaining personal well-being under constant observation. Emotional regulation, reflection, and intentional action become central to daily life, allowing the artist to operate effectively without sacrificing authenticity or creative output. Section 13 also highlights the interplay between legacy and experimentation. While the artist is conscious of their growing influence and the expectations that accompany it, they remain committed to innovation and risk-taking. Projects are approached with a dual focus, honoring established identity while exploring new artistic possibilities. This balance ensures continued audience engagement and critical acclaim, demonstrating that evolution and consistency are not mutually exclusive but mutually reinforcing. The artist's capacity to innovate within a framework of authenticity is a hallmark of this period, solidifying their reputation as both a cultural authority and a creative pioneer. Public engagement during this stage becomes increasingly sophisticated. Fans are drawn not only to the music but to the broader narrative of growth, resilience, and cultural relevance. The artist cultivates interaction through storytelling, social media presence, and carefully orchestrated appearances, allowing audiences to feel connected to both the art and the personal journey. This engagement reinforces loyalty, amplifies influence, and positions the artist as a figure whose significance extends beyond the immediate context of performance or release. Every interaction, project, and statement contributes to a cohesive narrative of sustained relevance and evolving impact. The artist's approach to challenges also demonstrates evolution. Scandals, rivalries, and public scrutiny, once destabilizing forces, are now navigated with strategic precision. The artist anticipates potential controversies, frames responses to maximize narrative control, and converts attention, whether positive or negative, into opportunities for creative or cultural influence. This approach reflects an understanding that perception is an essential component of influence. Managing it effectively enhances both career longevity and cultural significance. Section 13 underscores the artist's emergence as a multidimensional figure. Creative mastery, strategic thinking, emotional intelligence, and cultural awareness converge to produce work that is impactful, resonant, and influential. The artist's narrative becomes a lens through which audiences interpret music, performance, and public presence, creating an enduring connection that transcends individual projects. This stage demonstrates that influence and relevance are cultivated through intentionality, resilience, and the capacity to synthesize experience into coherent, compelling expression. By the conclusion of Section 13, the artist has not only consolidated their achievements, but also positioned themselves for continued evolution. Lessons from past turbulence, controversy, and rivalry inform deliberate creative and strategic choices, ensuring that each project reinforces legacy while inviting innovation. Section 13 captures the artist at a stage of both mastery and exploration, where sustained influence, personal growth, and cultural resonance converge. The artist has transformed the challenges of fame into tools of narrative, creativity, and strategic power, ensuring that their story continues to captivate, inspire, and shape cultural discourse well beyond the music itself. Section 14 marks a period in the artist's trajectory, characterized by refinement, cultural consolidation, and the pursuit of a lasting legacy. By this stage, the artist has navigated decades of scrutiny, controversy, rivalry, and personal growth, and what emerges is a figure who wields influence not only through music, but through cultural presence, personal narrative, and the strategic orchestration of public perception. The challenges of earlier stages, rivalries, media storms, and the pressures of fame have become lessons, shaping a sophisticated approach to creative production, audience engagement, and long-term career sustainability. This stage is less about reaction and more about intentional action. Every project, appearance, and decision is imbued with purpose, aimed at reinforcing authenticity while expanding impact. One of the hallmarks of this period is the deliberate cultivation of a multifaceted artistic identity. The artist's work increasingly reflects a balance between innovation and continuity, blending established stylistic hallmarks with explorations of new genres, collaborators, and conceptual frameworks. Past experiences with scrutiny and rivalry have instilled a keen sense of how artistic choices resonate with audiences, allowing the artist to create work that is both fresh and rooted in recognizable identity. This balance between evolution and consistency is critical. It ensures ongoing engagement with core audiences while attracting new listeners and maintaining relevance in a rapidly shifting cultural landscape. Public perception remains a crucial focus, though it is now managed with greater nuance and sophistication. Whereas earlier stages often involved reactive responses to scandals or media narratives, the artist now takes a proactive stance, crafting statements, appearances, and social media interactions that align with long-term narrative objectives. Attention, both positive and negative, is leveraged strategically, with controversy used not simply as a challenge but as a mechanism to amplify creative releases, highlight personal principles, and maintain cultural relevance. This capacity to navigate perception reflects a high degree of media literacy and emotional intelligence, demonstrating the artist's ability to operate effectively in a landscape where public opinion is both a resource and a potential hazard. Personal relationships during this stage are managed with heightened intentionality. The artist, having experienced betrayal, misunderstandings, and the isolating pressures of fame, now prioritizes collaborations and relationships that provide both creative synergy and emotional support. Romantic, familial, and professional relationships are evaluated not solely for loyalty or proximity, but for alignment with long-term personal and creative objectives. This strategic curation fosters an environment conducive to sustained artistic output, emotional well-being, and cultural influence. Support networks are no longer incidental but essential, providing stability amidst the ongoing demands of public and professional life. Creatively, Section 14 is marked by both mastery and experimentation. The artist synthesizes past experiences, turbulence, rivalry, controversy, into work that reflects emotional depth, technical skill, and thematic sophistication. Albums, singles, performances, and visual storytelling are designed to communicate layers of meaning, engaging audiences on multiple levels. This stage demonstrates the artist's ability to transform personal and professional challenges into creative fuel, producing work that resonates with both fans and critics. Artistic risk is embraced selectively, ensuring that experimentation reinforces identity rather than undermining it, and that each project contributes to a coherent, evolving narrative of personal and cultural significance. The artist's engagement with broader culture is particularly pronounced in this stage. Beyond music, they leverage influence to shape fashion trends, social discourse, and cultural conversations, creating a multidimensional presence that extends into public life and creative ecosystems. Strategic collaborations and public statements are employed to amplify impact, whether through philanthropic initiatives, cultural commentary, or cross-industry ventures. This expansion reflects both ambition and awareness. The artist recognizes that their platform carries weight and uses it intentionally to reinforce relevance, authority, and legacy. Financial and professional management during this period demonstrates strategic acumen. With years of experience navigating contracts, collaborations, and high-stakes opportunities, the artist approaches decisions with both foresight and precision. Investments, partnerships, and career moves are evaluated for their potential to enhance influence, support creative freedom, and sustain long-term viability. This disciplined approach ensures that each choice aligns with personal vision while reinforcing cultural authority and professional resilience. The ability to integrate financial, creative, and strategic considerations reflects a level of mastery that sets the artist apart as both a cultural icon and a savvy architect of their career. Psychologically, the artist demonstrates advanced emotional intelligence and resilience. The pressures of public scrutiny, rivalries, and media attention remain, but the artist has cultivated the skills to navigate these challenges without compromising integrity or creativity. Stress management, emotional regulation, and reflective practices allow for sustained performance and consistent engagement with audiences. The artist has internalized the lessons of previous stages, using experience as a foundation for strategic action rather than reactionary response. This psychological sophistication underpins both creative output and public persona, enabling the artist to operate effectively in a complex, high-stakes environment. Performance and public presentation are carefully calibrated to convey narrative, emotion, and cultural resonance. Stagecraft, choreography, visual storytelling, and public appearances are integrated with artistic intent, creating experiences that are simultaneously entertaining, meaningful, and emblematic of personal evolution. Fans interpret these elements not only as expressions of musical or technical skill, but as reflections of the artist's journey, struggles, and triumphs. The interplay between personal narrative and public performance deepens engagement, reinforcing loyalty while maintaining cultural relevance. Scandals and controversies, while still present, are navigated with strategic foresight. The artist employs careful framing, selective disclosure, and timing to ensure that attention contributes to narrative development rather than undermining it. Controversy is used as a tool to amplify releases, highlight principles, and maintain cultural visibility. This strategic engagement underscores a mastery of public perception and narrative control, allowing the artist to convert potential threats into opportunities for influence, audience connection, and creative advancement. Section 14 also emphasizes legacy building. The artist consciously considers how current decisions, projects, and public engagement will shape long-term influence. Mentorship of emerging talent, engagement with cultural initiatives, and deliberate narrative management all contribute to the consolidation of legacy. By synthesizing personal growth, creative innovation, and strategic positioning, the artist ensures that influence extends beyond immediate success, creating a lasting imprint on both industry and culture. By the conclusion of this stage, the artist has achieved a sophisticated integration of creativity, influence, strategy, and personal growth. Section 14 captures a period of consolidation and refinement, where lessons from turbulence, controversy, and scrutiny are transformed into deliberate action and enduring impact. The artist demonstrates that mastery is not merely about technical skill or popularity, but about the ability to navigate complexity, leverage opportunity, and shape cultural narrative while maintaining authenticity. This stage lays the foundation for final reinventions, enduring influence, and the legacy that will define their career for years to come, positioning the artist as a figure whose story, creativity, and impact resonate far beyond the immediate context of music or performance. Section 15 marks a stage in the artist's journey that is both reflective and forward-looking, representing a culmination of decades of experience, creativity, and public scrutiny. By now, the artist has endured the intense pressures of early fame, navigated rivalries, controversies, and personal struggles, and emerged with a refined sense of identity, purpose, and influence. This phase is defined by consolidation, reinvention, and the intentional shaping of legacy. It is a period where accumulated wisdom informs decisions. Creative output is strategically crafted, and every public action is weighed for its impact on both career and cultural significance. Here, the artist operates with a level of mastery that integrates artistry, strategy, and personal evolution, reflecting an understanding that sustained relevance requires continuous adaptation and foresight. Creatively, this period is characterized by bold experimentation grounded in established identity. The artist leverages the lessons learned from prior stages, turmoil, rivalry, public scrutiny, to push boundaries while maintaining authenticity. Projects are approached with deliberate intent, exploring innovative sounds, narrative structures, and visual storytelling techniques that enhance both artistic and cultural impact. Each release serves a dual purpose, satisfying core audiences while expanding reach and influence. The artist demonstrates an acute awareness of how context, timing, and presentation shape reception, ensuring that innovation does not alienate loyal fans, but instead reinforces credibility, relevance, and artistic authority. Collaboration remains a central aspect of this stage. However, partnerships are now pursued selectively, prioritizing alignment with long-term vision, mutual creative enrichment, and cultural significance. Collaborators are chosen not solely for commercial gain or popularity, but for their ability to complement the artist's strengths, challenge creative boundaries, and contribute to a cohesive narrative. This strategic curation of relationships extends beyond music to encompass fashion, media, technology, and philanthropy, reflecting an understanding that influence is multidimensional. By carefully selecting projects and partnerships, the artist ensures that every endeavor supports the broader trajectory of personal and cultural impact. Public perception, while always a factor, is now managed with sophistication and intentionality. Earlier stages often required reactive measures, responding to scandals, media misrepresentation, and rivalries. But Section 15 emphasizes proactive narrative shaping. Social media, interviews, performances, and public statements are orchestrated to reinforce authenticity, highlight creative evolution, and solidify cultural presence. Controversy, when it arises, is framed strategically to serve narrative purposes rather than being allowed to destabilize reputation. The artist demonstrates mastery over perception, leveraging attention, positive or negative, to amplify influence and reinforce long-term objectives. Financial and professional strategy in this stage reflects both prudence and ambition. Having experienced the complexities of contracts, investments, and industry dynamics, the artist evaluates opportunities not just for immediate return but for alignment with legacy, sustainability, and creative integrity. Business ventures, brand partnerships, and philanthropic endeavors are integrated into a broader plan that balances financial stability with cultural relevance. The artist exhibits strategic foresight, understanding that each decision, whether artistic, professional, or personal, carries implications for both present influence and long-term legacy. Psychologically, the artist operates with advanced resilience, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence. The pressures of fame, public scrutiny, and creative expectation, while ever present, are now navigated with composure and strategic insight. The artist has internalized lessons from past turbulence, rivalries, and personal struggles, using these experiences to anticipate challenges, regulate emotional responses, and maintain focus under high-pressure conditions. This psychological maturity enables sustained creativity, professional decision-making, and the ability to engage with audiences in ways that reinforce both personal integrity and public fascination. Performance and public presentation continue to evolve during this stage, blending technical excellence with narrative depth. Stage design, choreography, and visual elements are curated to communicate not only the artistry of music, but also the artist's personal journey, thematic concerns, and cultural commentary. Each performance is an opportunity to convey layers of meaning, connect with audiences, and reinforce the artist's evolving narrative. Fans interpret these moments as both entertainment and insight into the artist's identity, deepening engagement and reinforcing loyalty. Scandals and controversies, though less frequent or destabilizing than in earlier stages, are still navigated with calculated precision. The artist applies strategic framing, timing, and selective disclosure to ensure that attention is directed in ways that reinforce credibility, narrative coherence, and cultural influence. By transforming potential threats into opportunities, the artist demonstrates mastery over both perception and public narrative, converting challenges into mechanisms for engagement, influence, and creative expression. Mentorship and legacy building become increasingly central to this stage. The artist engages with emerging talent, sharing expertise, guidance, and opportunities that extend influence beyond personal creative output. This commitment to cultivating new voices reinforces the artist's cultural authority while fostering innovation within the broader industry. Through mentorship, the artist amplifies impact, creating a ripple effect that ensures continued relevance and influence, while solidifying a lasting legacy. Section 15 also emphasizes the integration of personal evolution and public persona. The artist synthesizes decades of experience, struggles, triumphs, rivalries, controversies into a coherent identity that resonates both privately and publicly. This integration allows for consistent authenticity, ensuring that public engagements reflect genuine values and perspectives. Audiences are invited not only to consume artistic output, but to witness the ongoing evolution of a figure who embodies resilience, creativity, and strategic acumen. By the conclusion of this stage, the artist has transformed prior turbulence into mastery, using experience, insight, and strategic foresight to consolidate influence, expand cultural impact, and shape legacy. Section 15 captures the artist at the apex of strategic creativity, a figure capable of navigating complex public, professional, and personal dynamics while maintaining authenticity, relevance, and audience engagement. This stage demonstrates that enduring significance arises not merely from talent or fame, but from the deliberate integration of creative innovation, strategic management, emotional intelligence, and cultural awareness. Ultimately, Section 15 illustrates the culmination of the artist's journey, where prior struggles, controversies, and lessons are synthesized into sustained influence, cultural authority, and legacy building. The artist emerges as a multidimensional figure, a creator, strategist, cultural commentator, and mentor. Their work, narrative, and public presence reflect an intricate balance of authenticity, innovation, and strategic foresight, ensuring continued engagement, relevance, and impact. Section 15, therefore, represents not merely a continuation of previous achievements, but the crystallization of the artist's identity, legacy, and long-term cultural significance, demonstrating how a career defined by challenge, resilience, and mastery evolves into enduring influence and inspiration. The conclusion of this narrative marks a pivotal reflection on the artist's journey, encapsulating decades of growth, struggle, triumph, and transformation into a coherent and enduring legacy. From the earliest stages of talent and ambition to the turbulence of rivalries, scandals, and relentless public scrutiny, the artist has navigated a complex web of personal, professional, and cultural challenges. Each stage of their journey contributed to the development of a multidimensional persona, a figure capable of captivating audiences not only through music, but through narrative, influence, and presence. The lessons learned through conflict, scrutiny, and vulnerability became tools of mastery, enabling the artist to transform obstacles into opportunities and turbulence into narrative power. Throughout this journey, one of the most striking aspects has been the artist's ability to integrate personal growth with professional strategy. Early experiences of rivalry and betrayal forced them to cultivate resilience, emotional intelligence, and strategic thinking. Scandals and controversies taught the importance of perception, narrative control, and the delicate balance between authenticity and public engagement. By synthesizing these experiences, the artist evolved from a reactive participant in the high-stakes world of fame into a proactive architect of both career and cultural impact. This evolution underscores a critical truth. Enduring success requires not just talent, but the capacity to learn, adapt, and harness the forces of public attention for meaningful and sustainable influence. Creatively, the artist's trajectory demonstrates a remarkable ability to convert personal experience into compelling art. Every album, single, and performance reflects layers of emotion, insight, and thematic complexity, transforming struggles into resonance that connects with audiences on multiple levels. Even during periods of intense pressure or vulnerability, the artist consistently found ways to channel energy into innovation, pushing boundaries while maintaining a recognizable identity. Their work became a reflection not just of skill, but of lived experience, a narrative of resilience, authenticity, and creative exploration that engages both fans and critics. In this way, the artist's oeuvre serves as a testament to the transformative power of adversity and the capacity of human experience to inform art in profound and enduring ways. The public dimension of the artist's journey is equally significant. Over time, the artist learned to navigate the complexities of audience perception, media scrutiny, and cultural expectation with increasing sophistication. Controversies, rivalries, and high-profile conflicts, once destabilizing, became opportunities to reinforce narrative, deepen engagement, and assert agency over public image. By mastering this interplay, the artist transformed attention into a mechanism for influence, ensuring that their story resonated beyond music and into broader cultural discourse. The artist's evolution demonstrates that legacy is shaped as much by how one navigates challenges as by the achievements themselves. Equally important is the artist's role in mentorship and cultural influence. By guiding emerging talent, engaging in collaborations, and participating in broader cultural initiatives, the artist extended their impact beyond personal work. These efforts reflect an understanding that legacy is cumulative. Influence is amplified when knowledge, opportunity, and inspiration are shared, ensuring continuity, growth, and relevance in an evolving cultural landscape. This integration of personal achievement with communal impact demonstrates both strategic foresight and a commitment to shaping the industry for future generations. Ultimately, the conclusion of this narrative reveals a career defined by complexity, resilience, and mastery. The artist's journey illustrates the interplay between talent, adversity, strategy, and cultural influence, highlighting how challenges, rivalries, scandals, scrutiny can be transformed into catalysts for growth, innovation, and legacy. By navigating each stage with intentionality, emotional intelligence, and creative ambition, the artist has achieved a synthesis of personal evolution, artistic excellence, and cultural relevance. Their story serves as both inspiration and blueprint, demonstrating that true influence is earned not merely through visibility or skill, but through the deliberate integration of experience, creativity, and strategy. In the final analysis, the artist stands as a multidimensional figure whose work, narrative, and presence resonate far beyond the immediate context of fame or performance. They embody the lessons of resilience, the power of narrative, and the enduring significance of authenticity in the face of complexity. The conclusion reflects not an end, but a consolidation, a point at which creativity, influence, and legacy converge to form a sustained, meaningful impact on culture, industry, and audience alike. Through this journey, the artist demonstrates that the interplay of adversity, mastery, and intentionality is what ultimately shapes enduring relevance, ensuring that their story, music, and influence continue to captivate, inspire, and define cultural discourse for years to come.